So Road to UFC is going to be taking place this week. We may not have a UFC card, but we are going to be having 20 fights, Dana White's Contender Series style, but except one-off fights for a contract. This is the first round of a tournament, and this tournament is, of course, now taking place in Shanghai at the UFC Performance Institute in China. This card in particular is going to be broadcast on Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern Time. The other cards are going to be broadcast either later on Friday or on Thursday. If you want to see my predictions for episodes 1 and 2, definitely check out those other videos on my YouTube channel as well. If you want to see more Road to UFC content and other UFC predictions, please do subscribe to my channel. And with that being said, let's now get into the predictions, because I tend to make these videos very long, and it is because I do kind of break down the fighters' entire styles, because a lot of the time these are people that I don't think many people are very familiar with. And the first fight actually is not a tournament bout. This is a bonus fight at 170 pounds between two guys who I believe will very likely get a UFC contract if they are to win the fight. Shogo Sato versus Kitt Campbell is going to be a good one. Now, the original matchup, in my opinion, was better. It was Kitt Campbell taking on Taiyuki Niraji. And as you guys know, we all love Taiyuki Niraji over here. This guy is one of the most exciting fighters to watch in MMA, just in general. I do believe he's injured or he has another fight booked at some point. No idea what's going on with him. Hopefully we get him in the UFC soon. But Shogo Sato, I will be honest, after watching the tape, very good replacement. My goodness, man, they found the Japanese equivalent to Taiyuki Niraji. Shogo Sato, this guy is all action. He doesn't really seem to have the most technique or really the best takedown defense or really anything. He just seems to be an all action striker, and I will be honest, I really did enjoy watching tape on him. If you guys want to know how to watch the tape, you've just got to search up their name in their native language here. For Shogo Sato, I watched some of his fights on, I believe it was like Yahoo Japan. They had his full fight here for free, and then the other ones are in like highlight form on the Pancrase YouTube channel as well, if you want to watch those. Now, I will kind of go break down through what he did. One of these fights, I'm not actually exactly too sure what opponent it was. One of these was the most brutal one-punch KO I have seen. I watched this fight here. This was back to the headshots. Really, really late stoppage. This opponent here, Shirakawa, was actually trying to take him down, and Shogo Sato just started pounding the back of his head, and then he was knocked out cold, and then the opponent, like the referee, didn't stop it for ages. That was a really, really bad stoppage. And then this fight here, maybe a little bit of a red flag to go against an opponent with so many, I guess, like losses, really. This was an absolute war, man. I mean, the commentators were going absolutely insane. I don't speak Japanese, but they were just kind of going nuts. And all I can say about Shogo Sato is this guy's all action, man. I genuinely do believe that he's going to put up a fun fight against no matter who you put him up there against. And he's taking on Kitt Campbell. And I do consider Kitt Campbell to be mostly a striker. He seems to be a Muay Thai striker, and he's got very upright sort of style. I don't really consider him to have the best defense, but he does have very solid offense, and he can do a bit of everything. He obviously does have pretty good punches, but he can knee, and he can kick from range quite well. He even showed some pretty solid offensive grappling, I thought, against Matt Vale, who I consider to have some pretty good grappling himself. And Matt Vale, of course, is from New Zealand. I thought he was potentially going to be the next Kiwi to sign to the UFC, and Kitt Campbell ruined my hopes and dreams of that happening. And then after that, he did go out there and he beat up Caleb Rideout. And Caleb Rideout is a prospect that the Australian regional scene has been really hyped up on. He's still a young guy, so he definitely still does have time to potentially come back and really make another run to maybe make it into the UFC. But the point is, Caleb Rideout's a very good win to have on your record, as well as a veteran in Kitt Campbell. At this point, he's had 21 professional fights on the regional scene in Australia. And across that period of time, every single person, I would say, aside from one fighter that Kitt Campbell has lost to, has either gone on to be a very good prospect or a very good veteran, or they've been in the UFC, or in the case of Rob Wilkinson, they've become a champion. You know, he fought Matt Vale a couple of times, won the more recent one. You know, JJ Ambrose has fought literally everywhere. John Martin Fraser's good. I believe he's the eternal champion right now. Isi Fikatefu is also very good. You know, I believe he has a win over Cam Ralston, who's going to be on the Contender Series again this year. So point being, Kit Campbell's a very solid fighter and he can do a bit of everything. I do worry just a little bit though with Kit Campbell's striking defense. I do believe that that's the weakest part of his game, and I'm very interested to see if Shogo Sato truly is 5'7" at 170 pounds, because I don't know, maybe it is just the Japanese regional scene. He didn't really look that small for the weight class at all. Against the guys that I was watching him fight, so it'll be interesting to see how small he looks against Kit Campbell, because Kit Campbell did have a pretty significant size advantage against Matt Vale, being 6'2", and Matt Vale is a bit shorter than that. So I'm interested to see how it goes. I honestly am going to, I guess, unfortunately pick against Kit Campbell here, just because I did see Shogo Sato's aggressiveness, and I do think that that aggressiveness is going to be quite important in a matchup like this against Kit Campbell, where I do believe that the striking defense is probably the biggest weakness in his game. However, Shogo Sato's takedown defense didn't look very good against this opponent here, Hiroki, so maybe we could see Kit Campbell utilize some wrestling to get it done like he did do against Matt Vale towards the end of the fight. I think this is going to be an awesome matchup. I'm really, really looking forward to this one, genuinely. I cannot wait to watch it. It's going to be great. And now we have Hyun Park taking on Jack Becker. I do believe Jack Becker wins this one here, and I do think this is a pretty good matchup for Jack Becker to then move on into the next round. Now, Jack Becker is a veteran now of the Australian regional scene, was a champion at Eternal MMA, was definitely on path to getting a big UFC contract, or get a UFC contract, I should say, or a contract into a big promotion. He unfortunately got injured, spent a lot of time recovering from that, come back, did lose a couple of times, but now he's on a bit of a win streak, and he did just knock out Aiden Aguilera with some pretty brutal hammer fist ground and pound, and that's the opponent that he actually did break his leg against in Aguilera. Jack Becker, once again, kind of like Kit Campbell, honestly, I would consider him to be mostly a Muay Thai striker. We have seen him utilize some wrestling in the past, or actually wrestling in the recently of his fights, but overall, I do consider him to be a Muay Thai guy. And another thing that is quite important about him, and I think would be important in this matchup, is he does throw a lot of kicks. He kicks to the body quite regularly. He kicks to the head somewhat regularly. And now he's fighting a shorter opponent, Hyun Park, who has very bad striking defense. And I think that those kicks from range are going to be money in this matchup, kind of like how they have been in his recent wins. Hyun Park, he actually stepped up, if I do recall correctly, against Shin Haraguchi on like 2 days notice or something like that. It was pretty ridiculous. Well, he had a full camp against Quillen Killed, and then he was chosen to fight against Shin Haraguchi on about 2 days notice, I should clarify. And he did get taken down by Shin Haraguchi, who just out-wrestled him the whole time. As much as I do love Haraguchi, he is probably one of the most boring fighters in the sport right now, let's be honest. But we did see him, you know, kind of show a bit of a wrestling, a bad wrestling against a former world champion. So, you know, asterisks on that one, short notice, this and that. But then he got knocked out by Abdullah Bayeda, who's not on a good run at the moment at all. That's not a good loss to have, especially right now. And that kind of was showcased with this bad striking defense. Overall, Jack Becker, I do believe, and it would be unfair to not mention this, I do think that Jack Becker in the past has shown some grappling defense holes and some takedown defense holes, but I do believe that at this point, Becker has shown that he can defend takedowns against better wrestlers than Hyun Park, and he is going to have a pretty big size advantage against Hyun Park as well. So I do think that's quite important in a potentially wrestling heavy matchup, but I do think that ultimately Becker is going to win this fight by just being the much better striker and striking from range. In this one here, I'm going to go with Becker to win by decision. And now we have Kai Xiong versus Kuya Ito. And I'll be honest with you guys, I genuinely believe that the winner of this fight is probably going to win the tournament. Now, unless maybe Lawrence Louis kind of shows to be a bit better than maybe I think he could be, because I think that these guys truly are quite elite fighters at this point, honestly. And I do genuinely believe, as I did just say, the winner could win it all. And I say that even though Kai Xiong actually does have a loss to Peter Danesoe, who fights on this show as well. But Kai Xiong is a very talented wrestler. We didn't see him be able to showcase that against Peter Danesoe last year, 2 years ago, in his showcase bout with Danesoe, but he was able to out-wrestle Chang Ho Lee, And that is a very important win to have on your record because Chang Ho Lee, of course, just got the second round TKO win over Cortavius Romeus in the UFC. And he, of course, did also beat Xiao Long to win the Road to UFC tournament just last year. And Chang Ho Lee is obviously now at this point a prospect to keep your eye out for because his wrestling looked so dominant against Romeus. And Sim Kai Xiong out wrestled him in the second and the third round, especially. Sim Kai Xiong, I think, is very small for bantamweight. In fact, both of these guys are. But I think that Xiong maybe could potentially make 125 pounds. I believe his fight against Danesoe was at 125. I would like to see him maybe try and make 125 again if he can get the UFC contract. But I think that against Kuya Ito, it's going to come down to if he can get the takedowns. Kuya Ito is a very odd fighter to watch because he doesn't really do anything. And what I mean by that is on the feet, he just doesn't really throw any strikes. He doesn't really he just doesn't really do anything. And against Road Coaster, I am very surprised that he got the decision win against Road Coaster. I do think that Road Coaster won that fight, and I think he won that fight somewhat clearly because Road Coaster was genuinely having little to no problems getting Kuya Ito down to the ground. And even if you do think that the fight was 2-2 going into the 5th round, I thought that Road Coaster won the 5th round. I mean, I don't know, maybe I saw something a little bit different, and I'm always a damage first scoring criteria person, but I did not think that Ito was doing enough damage on the feet at all in that fight, and he only really did start to do a lot of damage towards the end of the fight. So, but yeah, Ito, he's a pretty solid guy, and as I said, I do think that he's good enough to win the whole tournament if he can beat Kai Xiong. But the thing is, if you do watch that matchup between Road Coaster and Kuya Ito, you see that Kuya Ito's takedown defense is not that good, and what Sim Kai Xiong is very good at doing is getting takedowns. So I think that Sim Kai Xiong can go out there and get the takedowns going, get the wrestling going. I think this is a good matchup for him to win, and I think that if he beats Kuya Ito, I think he can potentially win the entire tournament. It looks like Kuya Ito's the big favorite on the picks, but I am going to pick Sim Kai Xiong to win this matchup. And now we have Yawei versus Deni Daffa, and there is no nice way to put it. This is just going to sound really, really harsh. First of all, don't bet on this fight. Just don't do it. I know a lot of people are going to want to bet on the Road to UFC matchups. I personally don't really recommend it because especially this first round, it's so hard to know how good these guys really are. But as for this matchup in particular, my goodness, I wouldn't touch it. I wouldn't touch it with a stick. But this is also, I think, the winner of this fight is going to lose in the next round. You know, I couldn't really say that about most of these matchups, but I was not impressed by really either of these two guys. Deni Daffa, you can watch his fights very easily on the YouTube channel, of course, for One Pride MMA, which has 900,000 subscribers. It's ridiculous how popular MMA is in Indonesia, and Deni Daffa is massive for this weight class. He looked huge against Unger Hans when he did fight him, and I believe Unger Hans now, if I'm not mistaken, is the champion of One Pride MMA at lightweight. In fact, that was a 5-round fight, of course, but if you watch this fight, Deni Daffa threw away the fight, man. Like, Unger Hans was death gassed in the 3rd round. He spent the entirety of the last 90 seconds of the 3rd round on his back. You know, those situations where there's someone on their back and there's someone standing up and just kicking their legs. Unger Hans was on his back on the ground, but he wasn't moving his body to avoid getting kicked or anything. He was just laying down to catch a breath. He was that gassed. And then he goes into the 4th round and gets Deni Daffa in the clinch and knees him to the body a bit. I think Deni Daffa kind of fell in a really odd way so that Unger Hans could just snatch his neck and choke him out. But I pretty firmly believe that if Deni Daffa had a little bit better fight IQ, he definitely could have beaten Unger Hans in this fight, and it would have been a massive win to have on his record because Unger Hans is clearly the best fighter in Indonesia, I believe, at the moment. But after that, he just kind of beat guys that are nowhere near as good at grappling as him. Deni Daffa, actually, he does have a background in Wushu, which is, of course, Kung Fu, pretty much. And you do see that he does throw a lot of kicks. He does use his range pretty well on the feet. But mostly in his fights, he just kind of showcases much better grappling than the people that he fights against. Obviously, the grappling level of fighters in Indonesia isn't all that high, and Deni Daffa just kind of exploits that. Yawei is interesting to me because I couldn't find all that much tape on him. I will tell you the fights that I could find. I did watch his fight against Kadyrov where he just got absolutely obliterated. And then I also did watch his matchup against Ganzarug or Den Batar. And then I watched another fight, but I will be fully honest with you guys, I'm not actually 100% sure which fight it was, but I do believe it was one of the more recent ones, but I could be incorrect about that. But I know I saw this fight against Ganzarug because you could not mistake this beard from anybody else. But anyway, against Ganzarug, questionable stoppage, I thought, and also showed pretty decent technical striking. I thought showed pretty decent ability to get takedowns as well. But this fellow Ganzarug gassed out in 60 seconds, and Ren Yawei couldn't finish him until the end of the second round. I do not believe that Ren Yawei really has very good finishing ability. This is just a matchup between two guys that I wasn't really that impressed with, but I will be honest, from what I saw, it looked like Ren Yawei was the more technical striker, and because of that, I'm going to go with him. But Deni Daffa is going to be way bigger than him in this matchup. There's going to be a huge size advantage for Deni Daffa. I just am not 100% sure if he's going to be able to outclass him in the grappling. So I'm going to go with Ren Yawei. I don't feel good about it at all, but we're just going to go with it and we're going to move on. And then we have Sulangrangbo versus Peter Danesoe. Peter Danesoe is an interesting case for me because I do genuinely believe in this guy's skill set. I just don't believe that he is a bantamweight. I do strongly believe that he should be fighting at flyweight. Now, he has fought at bantamweight very recently. He fought at bantamweight less than 4 months ago for UAE Warriors, and he was a bigger fighter than his opponent, but his opponent was also a tiny bantamweight himself. Peter Danesoe, of course, fought at 125 pounds. He did go out there and he knocked out Kai Xiong, and then he did another bonus fight where he did lose to Nyamjagal Tumendembarel, and that is how Tumendembarel got into the UFC, was pretty much based on this win over Danesoe. But Danesoe fights kind of like you would expect. He is a prospect of Topnoi Karam. If you guys don't know who Topnoi Karam is, one of the best personalities in MMA. He's absolutely hilarious. A former training partner of Kai Kara France when Kai Kara France used to train in Thailand. But yeah, Peter Danesoe is pretty much the prodigy of Topnoi Karam, who is just an absolute legend if you know who he is. And he is a very technical striker with a lot of power for these lower weight classes. I was about to say a lot of power for 125, but he also has a lot of power for 135. He knocked out Kai Xiong with a flying knee that was epic, and then he also knocked out this guy with one punch, man. Like, of course it was a ground and pound TKO, but he just hit Florentino and knocked him out pretty much with one punch. Sulangrangbo, this guy is a striker. I wasn't able to find much by searching up his name. However, if you do go to his Instagram account, and the username of his Instagram account is Sulangrangbo, he's posted all of his fights on Instagram Reels there, so that's very useful, I will be honest. And I was able to watch his fight against Chiba Rui. I watched his fight against this opponent, Gabriel Castro, and then I watched another one, but I'll be honest, once again, I'm not actually too sure exactly what fight it was that I did watch from him. And Sulangrangbo's a striker. He seems to be a pure striker. He showed good takedown defense against this guy Chiba Rui, but he was making his professional debut, so who's to know what that means. But honestly, Danesoe ain't going to shoot a takedown against him, and Rainbow does not seem like the kind of guy that's going to shoot for takedowns either. He seems like a purely striking fighter. So we're going to get a good, purely striking fight. The problem is, I just don't really know how good Sulangrangbo really is, but I do think that Peter Danesoe is going to be good enough to land big on him. Peter Danesoe, from what I've seen, a very, very powerful striker, very good striker, very technical striker with a Muay Thai style. He's from Thailand. He trains in Thailand. He's a great fighter. I think that Peter Danesoe can go out there and get it done. I think he gets it done by knockout in this fight. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next one, which will be episode number 4 and the final episode.